Imagine working day and night, sacrificing every dream, just to pay off your parents' house. Only for your dad to laugh in your face and hand your room to your brother. That's exactly what happened to me. And one phone call changed everything. Before diving into the story, comment where you're watching from, and don't forget to subscribe so you won't miss the latest stories. Dad, the house is officially ours. No more mortgage. Those were the words I said, my heart racing with pride. I had just made the final payment on my parents' house, using years of savings and extra shifts at work. I imagined tears of joy, a proud embrace, maybe even gratitude. In my head, I pictured Dad's eyes softening, Mom pulling me into a hug, maybe even a rare smile from him that showed he was proud of me. But instead, my dad laughed. Not a soft chuckle, a loud, mocking laugh that echoed through the living room like thunder. You? Pay off this house? Don't make me laugh, kid. You can't even manage your own life properly. The sting of his words cut deeper than I could have imagined. I stood there holding the receipt from the bank, the official proof in my hands, and yet my father refused to take me seriously. His eyes were filled not with pride, but with disbelief and judgment, as if all the hard work I had done meant nothing. My mom gave me a soft smile, her eyes saying what her lips didn't dare to speak, but she stayed quiet, caught between us as always. And then Dad dropped the bomb. Now that the house is free, we'll finally have space for your brother. He and his family will move in next month. Don't worry, you can figure out where you'll stay. My jaw nearly hit the floor. After all my sacrifice, after all my sweat and sleepless nights, after years of working like a machine just to make sure this home stayed ours, he was giving it away. Not just to anyone but to my brother, the so-called golden child. My brother Mark had always been Dad's favorite. He was older, more charismatic, the one who got praised at every family gathering. Dad bragged about him endlessly. His job, his car, his kids, the perfect family man. Meanwhile, I was the invisible one. The one who worked quietly in the background. The one who sacrificed without anyone noticing. Mark had never lifted a finger to help with the house. Not a single bill, not $1 toward the mortgage. But now that it was paid off, suddenly he and his family were going to swoop in and live here, while I, who had carried the burden for years, was supposed to figure out where to stay. That night I sat in my room staring at the ceiling, my heart aching with anger and betrayal. I thought about all the times I had said no to outings with friends because I couldn't afford it. I thought about the endless double shifts, the exhaustion, the dreams I had put on hold just to make sure my parents had security. Every bit of joy I had stolen from myself was for this house. And yet, in Dad's eyes, I was still the useless one. The next morning, Dad barged into my room without knocking. His voice was sharp. Start packing your stuff. Mark will need this space for his kids. That was it. The breaking point. My hands shook, but my voice came out stronger than I felt. Dad, you can't just throw me out. I paid for this house. He sneered, his tone dripping with contempt. You live here because of me, not the other way around. Don't get it twisted. You've always been the weak one. Mark is the son I can count on. I clenched my fists so tight my nails dug into my palms. Really? The son you can count on has never paid a single bill here. He's never even tried. I did this. Me. Every cent that cleared this mortgage came from my work, not his. But Dad just waved me off, dismissing me like a child throwing a tantrum. That's when it hit me. Reasoning with him was pointless. He had already made up his mind, and in his mind Mark would always come first. But what he didn't know was that I had taken precautions. The deed was no longer in his name. I had transferred the ownership legally. The house wasn't his to give away anymore. It was mine. That afternoon, I picked up the phone and called Mark. My voice was calm but my heart was pounding. Hey, just a heads up. Dad says you're moving in here. Mark laughed on the other end. Yeah, he told me. Finally some space for the kids. We'll be over this weekend. My blood boiled but I kept my tone steady. Listen carefully. This isn't Dad's decision. The deed is under my name now. I paid for this house and legally it belongs to me. The silence that followed was deafening. For the first time I had stunned him into silence. You're kidding, he finally said. I'm not, I replied firmly. So unless you're ready to pay rent and follow my rules, you're not moving in. I could almost hear his pride shattering through the phone. And when Dad found out I had legally secured the house in my name, the look on his face was unforgettable. Shock, anger, disbelief, it was all written across his face. He roared, "You betrayed me." I met his rage with calm. "No, Dad. I protected myself. For once in my life, I'm not letting you or Mark take advantage of me." The weeks that followed were tense. The house was filled with silence. Dad avoided me, refusing to even look at me. Mark tried to guilt-trip me, accusing me of tearing the family apart. But through it all, I stood my ground. For the first time, I wasn't the invisible one, the weak one. I was the one who had taken control of my own life. One evening, Mom quietly pulled me aside. Her eyes were misty as she whispered, "I'm proud of you. I know how hard you worked even when no one noticed. Don't ever think you're less worthy than your brother." Her words healed something inside me. For the first time, I felt seen. I felt valued. I realized then that sometimes, family won't ever see your worth until you stand up for yourself. And even then, they may never admit it. But that didn't matter anymore. Because the house wasn't just a building. It was a symbol of everything I had endured and conquered. It was proof that I was stronger than they had ever believed. And no one, not my dad, not my brother, not anyone, could ever take that away from me. My older brother Mark was always the shining star. Dad bragged about him at every family gathering. His job, his car, his so-called perfect family. It didn't matter what the situation was. If Mark was around, the spotlight was his. Me? I was the invisible one, the one sitting quietly in the corner while everyone clapped for him. Sometimes I wondered if Dad even remembered I was his child. Mark had never lifted a finger to help with the house, the bills, or our parents. Whenever money was tight, it was me working late hours, me missing out on things I wanted, me figuring out how to stretch every dollar to keep food on the table and lights in the house. Mark, on the other hand, would swing by with his shiny car, kids dressed like angels, and Dad would beam with pride as though Mark was the one keeping everything together. But the moment I cleared the mortgage, when I made the final payment after years of grinding, saving, and sacrificing, suddenly he was moving in, as if the place had always been his. He hadn't paid a dime, hadn't lost a night of sleep, hadn't skipped a single luxury, and yet now he was the one being rewarded. And I was the one being asked to move out. That night I lay in my bed staring at the ceiling, anger burning inside me like wildfire. My chest felt heavy, my mind replaying every sacrifice I had made just to get us here. I thought about all the weekends I had skipped fun with friends pretending I was too tired, when the truth was I couldn't afford to go out. I thought about the endless overtime shifts, the aching feet, the exhaustion I carried like a second skin. I thought about the trips I never took, the things I never bought, the dreams I had quietly folded and shoved into the back of my mind. All because I wanted to make sure my parents had a roof over their heads. And now, Dad was tossing me aside like I was nothing, like none of it mattered. The unfairness of it all gnawed at me. I wanted to scream until the walls shook. I wanted to run far away and never look back. But most of all, I wanted them to understand. This was my sacrifice, not Mark's. This wasn't about him. This house, this freedom from debt, this sense of security, it was mine, and I had given it to them out of love. Yet somehow I was being erased from the story like I never existed. I remembered sitting at the kitchen table as a teenager, watching Mom stress over the bills, her fingers trembling as she flipped through the pile of envelopes. I promised myself then that one day I'd make it better. I'd take that weight off her shoulders. And I did. I worked myself to the bone to make sure she never had to cry over bills again. But standing in that house now, it felt like none of that counted. In Dad's eyes, all that mattered was Mark. Every memory of being overlooked came flooding back. The times I brought home good grades only to be told, well, Mark did better. The times I achieved something small, only to be brushed aside because Mark had some bigger news. I thought maybe, just maybe, paying off the house would finally earn me respect. That Dad would finally look at me and see someone worthy. Instead, he laughed in my face and handed my place to Mark, as though I was just a guest who had overstayed my welcome. The bitterness twisted inside me, but underneath it was something even heavier. Heartbreak. Because I hadn't done this for recognition. I hadn't worked so hard just to be praised. I did it because I loved them. Because I wanted my parents to have security. Because I believed family meant sacrifice. But that night, staring at the ceiling, I realized maybe family didn't mean the same thing to everyone. Maybe to Dad, family only meant Mark. The more I thought about it, the clearer things became. If I didn't stand up for myself now, I never would. If I stayed silent, I'd be erased completely. Mark would move in, Dad would pat him on the back, and I'd be pushed out of the very home I had paid for. I sat up in bed, my heart pounding, a new kind of determination building inside me. For years I had been the quiet one, the one who swallowed the pain and kept going. But not this time. Not after everything I had given up. This wasn't just about a house. It was about my worth. My dignity. My voice. I thought about the documents I had signed, the proof that the deed was in my name now. For the first time I realized I had power. They could dismiss my words, they could ignore my sacrifices, but legally they couldn't erase me. The house was mine. And maybe, just maybe, this was my chance to finally show them who I really was. The anger still burned, but alongside it was a strange calm. I didn't have to scream or beg for them to see me anymore. I didn't need to prove myself to Dad or even to Mark. The proof was already there. Every hour I worked, every dream I sacrificed, every dollar I saved. It was written into these walls, into the very foundation of the home they took for granted. I whispered to myself in the dark, almost like a vow. This was my sacrifice. Mine. And they will never take that away from me. As I lay back down, the weight on my chest didn't disappear completely, but it felt lighter. For the first time in my life, I realized I didn't have to be the invisible one anymore. Because even if Dad never admitted it, and even if Mark never respected it, I knew the truth. And the truth was enough. This house, this victory, this proof of my strength, it all belonged to me. And no one, not even my father or his golden child, could steal that from me again. The next morning, Dad barged into my room without knocking, his heavy footsteps pounding against the floor like a warning. His face was stern, and his voice carried no hesitation. "Start packing your stuff," he ordered coldly. "Mark will need this space for his kids." For a moment I couldn't move. His words rang in my ears, sharp and cutting, as though I had just been told I no longer belonged in the home I had given everything to protect. My heart pounded, my chest tightened, but instead of shrinking back the way I usually did, something inside me snapped. That was it, the breaking point. My hands shook uncontrollably, but when I opened my mouth, my voice came out steady, firmer than even I expected. "Dad, you can't just throw me out. I paid for this house." He turned toward me, his lips curling into a sneer so familiar it made my stomach twist. His eyes were filled with the same dismissive disdain he had carried for me my whole life. "You live here because of me, not the other way around. Don't get it twisted," he spat. "You've always been the weak one. Mark is the son I can count on." The words hit me like knives, each syllable cutting into scars that had never healed. All my life I had been the weak one. No matter what I did, no matter how hard I tried, it was never enough for him. Mark was always the hero, the perfect son, the one Dad could count on. And me? I was just the shadow, the background character in my own family. But this time I couldn't hold it in anymore. I clenched my fists so tightly that my nails dug into my palms, my whole body trembling with both anger and sorrow. "Really?" I shot back, my voice louder now, stronger. "The son you can count on has never paid a single bill here. He's never sacrificed a thing for this house, or for you, or for Mom. I did this. Me. Every dollar, every late night, every ounce of my energy went into paying off this house. Not Mark. Not you. Me." But Dad just waved me off like I was a buzzing fly, like my words meant nothing. His hand flicked through the air, his face twisted in annoyance. To him, I was still the nuisance, still the child who would never be good enough no matter what I accomplished. And that's when it hit me like a lightning bolt. Reasoning with him would never work. He had already made up his mind. He had already chosen his golden son, and no amount of truth, no proof, no receipt would change that. In his world, Mark would always be the hero and I would always be the failure. It didn't matter that I was the one who had carried the burden of this home on my shoulders. It didn't matter that my blood, sweat, and tears were written into every corner of these walls. In his eyes, none of that was enough. But what Dad didn't know, what he couldn't dismiss with a wave of his hand, was the truth I had carefully secured long before this confrontation. I had the paperwork, the deed, the official legal proof that the house wasn't under his name anymore. It wasn't his to give away, and it certainly wasn't his to hand over to Mark. This house, the one he mocked me over, the one he laughed about when I said I had paid it off, it was mine. Legally mine. As I stared at him, a strange calm began to wash over me, pushing aside the trembling, the fear, and even the anger. He thought he could control me with his words the same way he always had. He thought his voice, his authority, his disdain could still crush me like it used to when I was a child desperate for his approval. But this time was different. This time I had the power and he didn't even know it yet. I looked him straight in the eye and for once I didn't flinch. Inside I was screaming, years of pain and neglect clawing at my chest, but outside I stood tall. He still thought of me as the weak one, the disposable one. But what he didn't understand was that the weak one had become the strong one. The quiet, invisible child had been the one holding the family together all along. And now I had proof. Every sacrifice I had made suddenly felt like it had a purpose. Every time I stayed late at work, every time I went without, every time I swallowed the pain of being overlooked, it all led to this moment. This house was mine not because he had allowed me to live here, not because I was lucky enough to have parents, but because I had earned it with everything I had inside me. Dad could sneer, he could wave me off, he could even try to throw me out, but none of it mattered anymore. The truth was unshakable. This house belonged to me. And no amount of favoritism, no amount of cruel words, no amount of denial could ever erase that. As he stood there, still convinced his authority could erase me, I felt something shift inside me. For the first time in my life, I wasn't afraid of him. I wasn't desperate for his approval. I wasn't longing for a shred of recognition. I didn't need it anymore. Because I had the one thing that spoke louder than his words: proof. The deed in my name. The security in my hands. The undeniable truth that I was not weak. That I was not invisible. That I was not nothing. This house, these walls, this life. I had built it, and I would not let him or Mark take it from me. Not now, not ever. And as I watched him glare at me, still blind to the reality he couldn't control, I realized something powerful. For years I had been living under his shadow, trying to earn a pride he would never give. But I didn't need it anymore. Because strength isn't about who someone else says you are. Strength is about standing firm when the world tries to push you down. And in that moment I finally knew. I was stronger than he had ever imagined. I picked up the phone and called Mark, my hands trembling slightly as I pressed his number. The moment he answered, I didn't even bother with pleasantries. My voice was sharp, cutting straight to the point. Hey, just a heads up. Dad says you're moving in here. Mark's voice came through casual and smug, dripping with the same arrogance I had grown up resenting. He didn't hesitate, didn't even sound surprised. Instead, he chuckled like it was the most natural thing in the world. Yeah, he told me. Finally some space for the kids. We'll be over this weekend. His words hit me like a slap. My blood boiled, anger surging through me like fire. After everything I had done, after every sacrifice I had made, he spoke as though I had simply been holding his place, keeping the house warm until he decided to step in and claim it. He spoke like the house had always been his by right, as if all my work, all my sweat, all my years of struggle didn't matter at all. I took a deep breath, steadying myself, because if I didn't, I was sure I would scream into the phone. My tone came out cold and firm, sharper than it had ever been with him before. Listen carefully, Mark. This isn't Dad's decision. The deed is under my name now. I paid for this house, every single penny, and legally it belongs to me. For the first time in as long as I could remember, Mark didn't have a clever comeback. He didn't laugh, didn't brag, didn't talk down to me like he usually did. There was only silence, a heavy silence that stretched across the line, and I knew I had stunned him. His pride, the same pride that had always made him feel untouchable, was cracking. You're kidding, he finally said. His voice lower now, the arrogance faltering. I'm not. I shot back, firm and unshakable. So unless you're ready to pay rent and follow my rules, you're not moving in. This house isn't yours, it's not Dad's, it's mine. And I won't let either of you treat me like I don't matter anymore. There was a long pause. I could almost hear his pride shattering through the silence, the gears in his head turning as he realized the truth he hadn't expected. For once he wasn't in control. For once Dad couldn't shield him, couldn't hand him the victory he thought he deserved. For once the power was in my hands. When I hung up, my chest was tight, my heart racing. But there was also a new kind of strength running through me. For years I had been the one standing in the background, invisible, overlooked, dismissed. But now I had drawn a line in the sand, and neither Dad nor Mark could cross it. It didn't take long for Dad to find out. That evening he stormed into the living room, his face red with fury, his voice thundering through the house. "You did what?" he bellowed, his eyes wide with disbelief. "You put the house in your name? You went behind my back? You betrayed me." The room seemed to shake with the force of his anger, but for the first time in my life I wasn't afraid. I stood there meeting his gaze without flinching, my voice calm but firm. "No, Dad. I didn't betray you. I protected myself. I protected what I worked for. For once in my life, I'm not letting you or Mark take advantage of me." The look on his face was priceless. Shock, anger, disbelief, all of it written clearly, as though he couldn't quite believe that I, the child he had always dismissed as weak, had finally stood up to him. He opened his mouth to argue, to shout again, but the words seemed to falter. Maybe deep down he knew I was right. Maybe deep down he realized he had underestimated me all along. Mom stood quietly in the corner, her hands clasped tightly together, her eyes moving between us. She didn't say anything, but I caught the faintest flicker of pride in her expression, the way her lips trembled as though she wanted to smile but couldn't. That tiny flicker was enough to tell me she had always known, even if she couldn't say it aloud, that I was the one who had carried this family when no one else did. Dad paced the room, his anger still spilling out in muttered curses and accusations. Ungrateful, selfish, tearing this family apart. But his words didn't sting the way they used to. For once they slid off me like water. Because now I knew the truth. I had the proof. I had the strength. Mark tried calling again later that night, his tone shifting from arrogance to desperation. He tried to guilt-trip me, saying things like, "Come on, we're family. Don't make this harder than it needs to be. Think about the kids." But I didn't waver. I reminded him again that this was my house, that I had earned it, that if he wanted anything from it, it would be on my terms. He didn't like it, but there was nothing he could do. The power he had always assumed was his had slipped away, and he couldn't stand it. As I lay in bed that night, the house quiet around me, I felt a strange mix of exhaustion and relief. For so long I had carried the weight of being invisible, of being overlooked and dismissed. I had begged silently for recognition, for Dad to see me, for Mark to respect me. But that night I realized I didn't need their approval anymore. I didn't need Dad's validation or Mark's acknowledgement. I had the one thing that mattered most, the truth and the strength to stand by it. This house wasn't just a roof over my head. It was a symbol of every sacrifice I had made, every battle I had fought, every time I had chosen responsibility over comfort. It was proof that I wasn't the weak one. I had been the strong one all along, the one holding everything together while they looked the other way. And no matter how loud Dad shouted, no matter how much Mark complained, they could never take that away from me. For the first time in my life, I wasn't just surviving in the shadow of my family. I was standing in the light, unshakable, undeniable, and free. In the weeks that followed, the house was filled with silence. Not the peaceful kind of silence, but the heavy, suffocating kind that seemed to hang in the air like a storm cloud. Dad avoided me at every turn, barely meeting my eyes, walking past me as though I didn't exist. He couldn't bring himself to admit he was wrong, and instead of acknowledging what I had done, he chose to shut me out. I could hear him grumble under his breath sometimes, muttering words like betrayal and ungrateful, but he never said them to my face. It was as if by ignoring me, he could undo the reality that the house was no longer his to control. Mark, on the other hand, was relentless. He called often, sometimes sounding angry, sometimes trying to act hurt, and other times pretending to be calm and reasonable. He accused me of tearing the family apart, of being selfish, of thinking only about myself. He would bring up his kids, trying to use them as a shield, as if their existence gave him the right to claim something that was never his. "You've changed," he said once, his voice dripping with disappointment. "You used to care about family. Now all you care about is yourself." I almost laughed at the irony. For years I had been the one carrying this family, making sacrifices no one noticed, standing in the background while Dad praised him for achievements he hadn't even earned. And now that I finally stood my ground, I was the villain in their story. But the silence in the house wasn't all bitter. there was something else too, something softer, almost healing. Mom. She had always been the quiet one. The one who kept the peace, who smoothed over arguments and tried to keep us all from falling apart. But in those weeks I started to notice her watching me differently. Her eyes lingered on me with a tenderness that hadn't always been there. A quiet acknowledgement she had kept hidden for too long. One evening, when the sun had set and the house was dim, she found me in the kitchen. I was sitting at the table, lost in thought, staring at the cup of tea cooling in front of me. She stepped closer, her movements hesitant, almost nervous, and then she sat down beside me. Her eyes were misty, filled with emotions she could barely contain. She reached out and touched my hand, her fingers trembling slightly as she whispered, "I'm proud of you." The words hit me harder than I expected. For a moment I couldn't breathe. I had been waiting my entire life to hear those words. Not just from her, but from anyone in this family. My chest tightened and I blinked rapidly, fighting the sting of tears. She squeezed my hand and continued softly, her voice breaking. "I know how hard you worked, even when no one noticed. I saw the nights you stayed up late, the mornings you dragged yourself out of bed, the times you held everything together while they didn't see. Don't ever think you're less worthy than your brother. You've always been more than enough." Her words healed something inside me I hadn't realized was still broken. For the first time I didn't feel like the forgotten child, the shadow in the corner, the one whose worth was measured only by silence. I felt like someone who mattered, someone who had finally been seen for the truth of who I was. That night, lying in bed, I let her words replay in my mind over and over. "I'm proud of you." They echoed louder than all of Dad's anger and Mark's accusations. For once, someone in my family had acknowledged me, not for what I could give them, not for what I could sacrifice, but for who I was and what I had built for myself. It made me realize the hardest lesson of all. Sometimes, family won't see your value until you stand up for yourself. Sometimes they will keep taking until you have nothing left, and they will still call you selfish the moment you draw a line. But strength doesn't come from their approval. It comes from the moment you finally choose yourself, even when they hate you for it. And when I finally did, I realized something even more powerful. I didn't need their approval anymore. I didn't need Dad's respect or Mark's acknowledgement. Their opinions no longer defined me because for the first time I had defined myself. I had chosen my own worth and no one could strip it away. The house became more than just walls and a roof. It wasn't just bricks and wood. It was proof of everything I had endured and everything I had overcome. Every nail, every room, every corner carried my story. It was proof that I was stronger than they had ever believed, proof that I had carved out something lasting when they had only tried to take. When I walked through the hallways, I no longer saw just a home. I saw my resilience. I saw my independence. I saw the version of me that had been hidden for years finally standing tall, unshakable and undeniable. There were nights when I heard Dad's footsteps pacing angrily in his room, or when Mark's texts buzzed my phone with accusations, but none of it shook me anymore. Their anger, their disappointment, their silence, it was all powerless against the truth I now carried. I had survived their doubt, their control, their favoritism, and I had come out the other side stronger than ever. And no one, not my father, not my brother, not their words, not their silence, could take that away from me. Thank you for watching this story. If it touched your heart, don't forget to hit that like button, share it with someone who needs to hear it, and of course, subscribe to the channel for more emotional stories every week. Your support means the world. It keeps these stories alive.